Hey, this is Ron Howe. We're inside the Bass Shack. I'm with RB Bass, and what we're going to do today is we are going to bring you some wintertime fishing tips for largemouth, smallmouth, and spotted bass. It applies to all three species. I wanted to go old school, so I busted out the whiteboard. Hey, it's a cool way to draw it out. We're in late fall here in California this year, and we're getting ready for some wintertime bass fishing. Temps are dropping, leaves are falling, and winter's coming soon. A lot of people avoid winter bass fishing. It's some of the best fishing of the year. Between storms, when you get out on the water, and one of the favorite ways to fish for fish this time of year, heading all the way into late winter, early spring, is to fish with jigs. Jig fishing in the winter will get you lots of bites. It will get you big bites, and it will catch all three species of bass, no matter where you're at in the United States. Now, today, I did a little drawing. Maybe my art's not the best. I designed a couple little rock piles here, some ledges, a tree. You got, basically, if you're in a canyon reservoir, this is the bottom of a V-gut. Right in the bottom of the gut, right? So we're just going to talk about some things, where fish position themselves at, and where you can go out and concentrate and catch some fish. And again, this is going to work anywhere you go from now all the way into March, even into April, but really going to target the December, January, February mode of deep water jig fishing. So let's talk about what do bass eat in the winter. Shad, minnows, different bait fish, bluegill, and crawdads, right? So a jig imitates a lot of different things. It's not always just a crawdad. But we're going to focus on crawfish right now in this segment because it's relative to the point that we're trying to cross with you and help you be a better wintertime bass fisherman, get on the water and catch fish. So crawdads in the wintertime tend to live on deep flats. Some of you might hear the term flats. So a flat is also similar to a ledge or a staircase, which I've drawn right here, okay? So this right here would be a flat ledge or a flat, but it's deep. It's out in 35 feet, right? And that 35 to 40 zone is where a lot of crawdads actually migrate to for winter on lakes, okay? If your lake's not a super deep lake, your crawdads might migrate into that 20-foot zone, okay? It just depends on what type of lake you're on. That's why I drew this differently. So we're going to focus on this type of fishing right now, which is deeper craw ledge fishing. Now, when you're fishing 35 to 40 feet, personally myself, I like to fish 12 to 15-pound line unless there's zero wind and it's a finicky bite. I might go all the way down to 8-pound test. Down in 35 to 40 foot of water, personally, I like to throw a 3/4 ounce jig. There are times where I might throw a 3/8 ounce or half only if I'm getting hung up too much with a 3/4 ounce. So there's some different ways to fish this jig. If your boat's positioned here or your kayak's fishing here, you can cast up here into the 15-foot shallows, bring your jig down, you'll feel it fall down that ledge and get down in here. And sometimes there'll be suspended fish sitting right here that will see that jig fall down that ledge, and you'll get a thunk before it ever hits the bottom. Comes off that ledge and it's falling, and you get a tick. Reel down and swing on that thing. So I recommend also with jig fishing a 7'3" medium heavy rod of your choice. I like to pair that with at least a 7-to-1 gear ratio because a lot of times when they hit that jig and they'll pick it up and move, they move a lot of line. And when you set the hook, you need to be able to get a lot of line back to catch up to that fish. So a higher gear end reel, 7-to-1, 8-to-0, etc. Personally, I use a 7'3" Abu Garcia Veritas, and I've been liking any mix of Abu Garcia reels. Again, 7-to-1 or 8-to-0, that's the critical part. Fluorocarbon line is what I prefer. Again, 12 to 15 is a staple, 8-pound if it gets real light. So down here in 35, 40 feet on that deep flat is where crawdads live. That's where the majority of bass are going to be. And this is going to be consistent for both spotted bass and largemouth. Now, it's not uncommon if the thermocline in the lake has not moved up or down with the water These bass can be down here. You see I got 80 foot at the bottom of a V-gut or ditch. They can be all the way down here in that 70, 80 foot zone too. So you're going to have to look at your meter, probe around and figure out where you get the bites. But once you find that out, you can kind of go around a lake and target that same zone at different areas. Here you see little rock rubbish I've drawn. One of the keys with throwing that jig is to get it come across those rocks and really slow. And then sometimes when you hit a rock, let it stay still and just shake your tip. That's going to make that jig do like this and then barely move it. These are winter fish. They're not moving really fast to come and get your bait. But you pop off that rock just right, you're going to generate and trigger strikes. So 35 to 40 foot is a really good zone. 50 to 55 can be a really good zone for largemouth, and all the way down to 70 and 80 for smallmouth and spotted bass. And occasionally you will pull a bigger largemouth in that 50-55 column. They'll just stay down in there, and they might just be on this little bit of the flat where the drop-off's at right there, okay? So those are some key things with wintertime jig fishing. Now, let's talk about a little bit of shallower fishing in the winter, right? You still could fish that jig and catch winter fish, because these fish that live down here on this rocky reef or suspend off this drop-off, they sit out here suspended, right? At some point during the day, if there's a breeze, it's going to make the jig bite better, always with the breeze. So you got a breeze, you can throw a little bit bigger jig and draw strikes from any species of bass. What will happen is if there's a little wind and a little bit of a mud line, those fish may move up into that 20, 10, and even 5 foot zone at some point during the day. Usually first thing in the morning or later in the day when it warms up. They're going to move up in here and search around for other bait species that are shallower, maybe some shallow crawdads, and they're there to feed. So if you're up here fishing these shallower zones, 20 foot and in, I recommend a 3/8 ounce jig in that 20 foot, 15 foot zone. And then up here where I'm in that 10, 8, that little zone there, you can see where I just come into the rocks, a 1/4 ounce jig is going to be the deal. Let's talk about wintertime jig colors. Now, there's a ton of great jigs on the market. I use various brands myself. I am using a lot of football heads with different trailers. I really like that when it gets tougher. There's also some new swing heads on the market that are excellent, and you can work them just like a jig, but without the skirt. We'll show you that in just a second. So in these shallower zones, 1/4 ounce, 3/8 ounce, staple wintertime stuff, brown and purple, green pumpkin. I really like green pumpkin with blue. A lot of canyon reservoirs, like what I've drawn here, they have like a freshwater brown crawdad or lobster. They'll get blue claws. Now, a great thing to do is get some dip and dye pens and simply dye the tips of the claws with a little bit of red and a little bit of blue, because that's what they're seeing down there. If you ever pull one of those crawdads out, it's super vibrant and bright. Those reds and blues are really bright, and it's the only color other than the natural brown of the crawdad that stands out. So make it look as real as you can. And in winter, the crawdads, a lot of them get that blue to them. So those are some good ways to color your stuff. So again, some basics. Later in the afternoons, looking at some mud lines, fishing up shallow, but having that deep water nearby at any point, always. They're going to live down here in the wintertime, or even down here at the 50-foot column, or deeper for spotted bass and smallmouth. But they will move up. So if spotted bass and smallmouth are down here living in 50 to 70 on your reservoir, when they move up to feed, they're going to move up to 35 to 40, okay? Largemouth living in 50 to 35, if they feed and they move up, it's probably going to move up to about that 20 zone, which is right where you're getting a deep crankbait also in the winter. And there's some new deep crankbaits that just came out. So whole different seminar that we'll talk about down the road. So I hope these tips are pretty good for you. They help you catch some fish. I will give you one other thing than a jig. Fish it exactly the same way. If there's no wind and the bite gets super tough, try a tube. You shove a football head in a tube and fish all these zones with a 1/2 ounce football head and get a tube down there on 8-pound test. Whether you use a bait caster or a spinning reel, it doesn't matter. But you could fish those zones on lighter line and even up into these shallower zones with the tube when there's zero wind and drag it super slow. And you'll just get a tick. On that tube, those hooks are so sharp, all you gotta do is reel down and put it to them. So now I'm gonna show you a couple of newer jig trailers that I've been using and getting some fish on lately. They're made by Berkley Power Bait, so I'm going to grab them. They're right here in front of the camera. Hang on just a second. So this is the packaging. It's the new Berkley Chigger Bug. That happens to be California. Okay. And this is what California looks like out of the package, right? Your green pumpkinish watermelon red flake. Hopefully you can see that pretty good. And here is green pumpkin blue flash. I really like this color for when it's really cold. Again, it's green pumpkin. You got some blue in there. Hopefully you can see that. Really nice looking bait. Now what I like about this chigger bug is if you notice, and I love throwing chigger craws too, but this chigger bug, this new bug's got a little wider stance on the claws. So those freshwater craws or little lobsters, some of them are like freshwater lobsters. We've all seen them. We know what we're talking about here. They look a lot like that with that stance. So it gives your jig a little wider stance on the claws, which is a lot more like the crawdads that are out here deep in these freshwater reservoirs, especially ones that have incoming creeks or rivers. There's a lot of this color type crawdad in the wintertime. So we talked about weights. There is some new product out from Berkley Fusion. These are the new football head with a needle point hook. They got a new cone shape head. This is a 1/2 ounce. Has an excellent bait keeper on there. So when you shove that on there, whether you're using a spider grub or like I said, a chigger craw or these chigger bugs, it's going to hold that bait on there really good. And of course, if you're using Berkley, they're going to hold on 18 times longer. 3/4 ounce. So down there fishing those deeper depths and getting in the bottom fast. Again, why 3/4 ounce? Because you could feel the bottom better. That's one reason. Number two, if the fish are down there, why waste so much time with a lighter jig waiting it to get to the bottom? The 3/4 ounce, you're on the bottom right away. You're where the fish are at, so you're going to catch more bass. So these are straight shank standard football style, but with a new cone head. These are going to be phenomenal in structure. Berkley Fusion, okay? Berkley Fusion also has a brand new swing head that just came out. Now this is pretty cool because this swing head is put on there with a swivel, a little ring, right? Giving it locks of action. There's a little more gap than the ones that are connected right to the hook. So that's going to get even more action with the plastic. And you'll see that in the design, it's rounded right there so the bait can get up behind it and this thing can rock. So when it gets on that rock and you're hopping it, that bait's going to be moving around quite a bit. Has a nice bait keeper to shove into your bait to hold it place, and it's rigged Texas style. So it's going to be weedless too. So these are two newer type ways to throw a football head type bait with a chigger craw, a chigger bug, or your favorite spider grub as well. So a couple things for you. On the whiteboard, hopefully some of this helps you out, gives you a painted picture of wintertime fishing. And one last thing, you don't always have to fish it this way. This staircase or flat comes all the way out, just like a staircase. So think of it like that. You push your boat this way. If those fish are in 35, you cast over here to the other side of that staircase and drag it back to you, keeping your bait in the strike zone for the longest time possible to catch more winter bass on jigs and have a lot of fun. I hope you enjoy this. Again, Tournament Angler Ron Howe in the RB Bass Shack. See ya.